The icy November wind ripped through Seattle's avenues. As Ethan Callahan, his hands shoved into the pockets of his worn coat, crossed the street toward the small corner bakery. His frayed shoelaces scraped the wet asphalt. Each step seemed to betray that he was out of sync with the rest of the world, as if his life had been paused while the rest of the city kept rushing by. Ethan hadn't always been in this position. 2 years earlier, he worked as a mechanic in a shop specializing in classic cars. He had loyal customers, a respectable routine, and modest but solid dreams. Everything crumbled when an accidental explosion in the shop left him with extensive burns and without his tools. The shop went bankrupt. The owner, without adequate insurance, disappeared. Ethan ended up alone, temporarily disabled, and completely without income. Now, at 34, he lived in a community shelter, trying to find small maintenance jobs, sometimes fixing jammed doors, other times cleaning gutters. The city was growing, skyscrapers were multiplying, but Ethan always felt in the shadow of each of these buildings. On that particularly cold morning, he had gone 2 days without a decent meal. The coffee served at the shelter was too weak to appease his rumbling stomach. Upon seeing the illuminated sign of the bakery, Sunny Bakers, he took a deep breath. He wasn't going to ask for money. He just wanted something that was about to be thrown away. He pushed open the door, and the aroma of warm bread mingled with the scent of butter and cinnamon. People chatted, laughed, and fiddled with their cell phones, oblivious to his entrance. He walked to the counter where Martin, the clerk, stood, a man in his early 30s, with a tired face and a slightly arrogant expression. Ethan cleared his throat. "Is there any expired bread that I can eat?" she asked in a low but firm voice. Martin raised his eyebrows, flashed a mocking smile, and let out a laugh that caught the attention of several nearby tables. "Expired bread?" repetitively, theatrically. "We sell fresh produce here, my friend. If you want trash, the bin is out back." Ethan's face burned more than his scars. A woman nearby turned her face away in disapproval, but said nothing. Another simply looked away, as if the mere act of witnessing the scene was too uncomfortable. Ethan took a deep breath, ready to turn and leave, but before he could, a deep voice broke the awkward silence that had fallen. "Is this any way to treat someone who is asking for help?" The voice came from a tall, well-dressed man, wearing a grey suit jacket over a black shirt with no tie. His light brown hair waved slightly, and his eyes seemed to analyze every detail of his surroundings with calculated calm. He held a leather briefcase under his arm and a cup of coffee in his other hand. The attendant, recognizing the figure, immediately turned pale. "Mr. Bennett, I didn't know that. Clearly, I didn't know many things." The man interrupted. Alexander Bennett, owner of one of the largest artisan bakery chains in the northwestern United States, was not only a millionaire, he was an entrepreneur known for believing in social projects and employing vulnerable people. But no one there expected him to be discreetly visiting that small branch that morning. Without raising his voice, Bennett approached Ethan. "Are you hungry?" Ethan simply nodded, feeling a knot tighten in his stomach. He didn't want charity, but he also didn't have the strength to refuse. Bennett placed his hand on his shoulder, guiding him to an empty table. "Sit down. Let's sort this out." Within seconds, he called a kitchen worker over and discreetly ordered a full meal. Eggs, toast, bacon, and a freshly baked loaf of bread. At the same time, he turned his gaze to Martin. "We'll talk about your job later." Martin swallowed hard. Meanwhile, Ethan's reaction was a mixture of embarrassment, surprise, and shame. Why would a stranger, especially a clearly wealthy man, care? Why was he there at that particular moment? Ethan wasn't naive. Coincidences like that were rarely just coincidences. Sitting at the table, he felt his fingers tremble when the dish arrived. Hunger called to him, but his mind was elsewhere. Something about that encounter seemed bigger than just an act of kindness. Bennett observed, but not with a look of superiority. rather with a kind of silent assessment, as if he were trying to understand who this man was before deciding his next move. And in that instant, without realizing it, Ethan had just entered the center of a story that would completely change his life, for better or for worse. Seattle awoke each day shrouded in a typical autumn fog, and for many residents, this was just another detail of the routine. But for Ethan, each morning felt like the beginning of a silent battle against hunger, against the cold, against the very feeling of invisibility. The unexpected breakfast offered by Alexander Bennett didn't solve all his problems, but it undoubtedly marked a break in the gloomy pattern of the last few months. The bakery's activity continued naturally, but Ethan was aware that some glances were falling on him, not with disdain, but with curiosity. Alexander remained standing for a few seconds before sitting down opposite him. He said nothing. He merely observed how Ethan held the cutlery carefully, as if afraid of appearing opportunistic. It was a simple gesture, but revealing. Despite owning the network Bennett's Artisan Bakery, Alexander rarely visited the branches in person. His routine involved meetings, travel, and negotiations. But that small shop in Seattle was special. It had been the first bakery he inherited from his father, decades earlier. For him, it was more of an observation point on how the community functioned than a simple business. While Ethan ate, Alexander mentally assessed the state of the shop. He noticed minor oversights, broken tiles, a flickering light bulb, creaking tables. Elements that might go unnoticed by ordinary customers, but not by someone who knew every detail of artisanal cooking and valued the customer experience above all else. It was at that moment that Ethan looked up and noticed the businessman's attention. He felt uncomfortable, but maintained his composure. When she finished eating, she put down her cutlery and took a deep breath. She didn't want to prolong the situation any longer than necessary, and her gratitude weighed as heavily as her shame. Alexander spoke first. "Are you from Seattle?" Ethan nodded, offering few details. He didn't go into lengthy explanations or immediately mention the accident. He preferred to focus on what mattered. He was looking for work, any work, as long as it was respectable. Alexander listened to each word calmly, without interrupting. He showed no pity, and that surprised Ethan. Pity was what he most often encountered, and it was what he hated most. During the conversation, Alexander realized there was something about the man in front of him, a quiet dignity, an inner strength that survived despite everything. That sparked his professional interest, not just his emotional interest. "Do you know how to fix things?" he asked with an air of someone who already had an intention. Ethan nodded. He mentioned that he was a mechanic, that he knew how to work with tools, that he repaired old machines out of passion. Alexander absorbed every detail as if mentally assembling a puzzle. As they chatted, customers came and went, and the smell of freshly baked bread mingled with the welcoming atmosphere, although Ethan noticed nuances in the place that suggested not everything was as harmonious as it seemed. The waiter Martin, for example, seemed restless, and some employees whispered while arranging trays. The region's cultural climate also left its mark. Seattle was a meeting point between technological innovation and growing inequality. Skyscrapers housed billion-dollar companies just blocks from overcrowded housing projects. This disparity was so evident that it seemed to be part of the landscape, influencing decisions, temperaments, and even small attitudes like Martin's cruel laugh. When Alexander finally stood up, he called Ethan to follow him to the back of the bakery. They passed through a door that led to the stockroom and the hallway that led to the manager's office. Inside, a simple room housed files, a desk, 2 chairs, and a window overlooking the busy street. The businessman closed the door and crossed his arms. "The truth is that this branch is poorly managed," he said bluntly, "and this morning's situation only confirmed what I've been observing in recent weeks." Ethan, not knowing how this related to him, remained silent. Alexander continued, "I need someone who can do small repairs, someone trustworthy, who is willing to learn. The work isn't glamorous, but it's honest, and it pays weekly. Ethan felt a tightness in his chest. It seemed too good to be true, but Alexander's gaze left no room for doubt. The American culture of valuing hard work, even in the simplest jobs, made that offer even more significant. It wasn't charity, it was an opportunity. Ethan finally spoke. "I accept. If you truly believe I can help, I accept." Alexander extended his hand. "Great. We start tomorrow." As he left the office, Ethan felt something he hadn't experienced in a long time, a spark of hope. He didn't know that that simple yes would place him in the midst of internal company tensions, hidden rivalries, and decisions that would change the course of his life. Decisions that involved not only work, but also the past and present of people with far more power than he imagined. The next day dawned with an even denser fog than the previous one. Ethan arrived at the bakery early, an hour before the agreed time. Anxiety had kept him awake during the night, but he preferred to interpret that as motivation. He carried a small backpack with tools he had managed to save over the months. A rusty wrench, a nearly worn-out roll of electrical tape, a pair of worn-out pliers. It wasn't much, but it was all I had. Entering through the back door, he found the morning shift starting their work. The smell of fermenting dough filled the air, but this time he was there as an employee. He wasn't wearing a uniform yet, that would come later. However, the feeling of belonging, however small, was already altering his demeanor. Alexander was not present. Instead, the interim manager, a man named Cole Turner, approached Ethan with a neutral expression. Unlike Martin, he didn't show disdain, but there was a cold professionalism that made it clear he hadn't been fully briefed on the new employee. "You're Ethan, right?" he asked, consulting a clipboard. "Alexander asked me to advise him on some repair needs. The shop needs some adjustments." The way he pronounced Alexander's name betrayed a certain discomfort. Ethan noticed, but didn't comment. Cole led him to the kitchen. The machines vibrated as production began. A malfunctioning dough mixer, a proofing oven that took longer than usual to heat up, and a loading door that frequently jammed. The bakery's routine was intense and left no room for error. Any delay affected the entire production process. "The priority is the back door," Cole said. "It's been jammed for weeks. I've complained before, but only now has Mr. Bennett decided to send help." It was a simple phrase, but loaded with bitterness. Ethan sensed there was something more behind it. Still, he focused on the work. The door really was misaligned and the frame worn. These were fixable problems, the kind that restored a sense of competence he thought he had lost. While he worked, some employees watched from afar. They murmured, exchanged glances, trying to understand who the newcomer was and why the owner of the chain himself had hired him. Martin kept his distance, but his restless gaze and the nervous tapping of his fingers on the counter made it clear that he felt threatened, perhaps by Alexander's reprimand, perhaps by something deeper. As the hours passed, Ethan realized that the bakery operated in a kind of tense equilibrium. Whispered conversations, averted glances, and restrained attitudes revealed silent conflicts. During the break, while drinking water near the storage area, he overheard two employees talking quietly. "He came yesterday without warning." "Bennett," said a female voice. "What do you think it means?" a boy replied. "It means someone here is going to fall. It's no coincidence." Ethan hadn't intended to listen, but he couldn't help it. Alexander's visit was no ordinary occurrence, and the businessman himself had hinted that something was wrong at the branch. After lunch, Cole approached again, but now with a tense expression. "Mr. Bennett asked you to inspect the greenhouse as well," he said reluctantly. "But I want to make it clear that any reported faults will be your responsibility. I don't want any trouble here." It was an unfair yet revealing statement. Cole seemed more concerned with his own position than with the shop's repairs. Ethan, realizing this, simply nodded and examined the greenhouse. He quickly discovered the problem: a poorly fitted resistor and makeshift wiring, signs of repairs done by someone unqualified, or worse, by someone who wanted to create a problem. That night, Alexander returned discreetly. The bakery had already closed to customers, and the employees were cleaning the shop. Upon entering, his silent presence had an immediate effect. Some straightened up, others avoided eye contact. Ethan was still working in the greenhouse when he heard footsteps. Alexander approached with his hands in his pockets. "How was your first day?" "Productive," Ethan replied. "But I found some odd things. Nothing critical, but too poorly done to be an accident." Alexander observed the greenhouse, then glanced at Cole in the distance, who was pretending to organize documents. "I'm noticing a pattern," he said quietly enough for only Ethan to hear, "and you're helping me confirm it." The statement intrigued Ethan. What pattern? Against whom? Against what? That same evening, as Ethan was closing his toolbox, Alexander asked him to accompany him to the office. Once inside, he closed the door and sat down at his desk, resting his arms in front of him. "Ethan, I need you to understand something," she began. "This branch is under suspicion. Inconsistent sales, above-average waste, unreported complaints, and petty saboteurs operating within the team." Ethan was surprised. "Saboteurs? Perhaps more than one," Alexander confirmed, "and your role here may be greater than just fixing things. You're seeing details that others missed. I want you to keep observing, discreetly." That wasn't just work. It was involvement in a serious and possibly dangerous internal conflict. And deep down, Ethan knew accepting this task would place him at the center of tensions he didn't fully understand. But he also knew that missing this opportunity could throw him back to rock bottom. At the end of that day, as he walked toward shelter under the cloudy Seattle sky, a certainty grew in his heart. That bakery was hiding much more than just maintenance problems. He was hiding secrets, and now he was right in the middle of them. As the days passed, Ethan slowly began to integrate into the bakery's routine. He would arrive early, set up his small set of makeshift tools, and review each item on the repair list Cole gave him. However, the more he delved into the workings of the shop, the more he realized that the problem there wasn't just technical, it was human. And one of the first sources of this tension was Martin, the attendant who had laughed at him on the first day. Martin used to act defensively whenever Ethan approached, and the hostility didn't just stem from shame over the humiliation in front of Alexander. There was something more. His movements were anxious, almost calculated, and Ethan noticed that he always avoided getting close to the main cash register. One afternoon, while replacing a door hinge, he heard Martin arguing on the phone behind the shop. "I told you I'd get the money this week. No, don't force me. I'm already trying." His voice trembled. Ethan couldn't understand the rest, but the fragmented nature of the conversation made it clear. Martin was involved in something dangerous. And that made him unpredictable in the dynamics of the bakery, the increasing pressure. Meanwhile, Alexander requested frequent updates. Through messages, he inquired about schedules, employee behavior, inventory details, and routines. Ethan never felt like a spy, but the extra role increased his emotional burden. At the same time, Cole, the manager, was showing increasing irritation at any interference. "This wasn't necessary," he complained one day, when Ethan asked for access to the maintenance records. "I've been a manager for years. I know how to run the store." But the numbers didn't add up. There were boxes of ingredients that had gone missing, orders supposedly placed but never delivered, and every time something disappeared, it was recorded as a supplier error. Seattle, as a backdrop, amplified these tensions. The city's economy offered opportunities only to a few. Many workers faced rising rents and stagnant wages. This social pressure seeped into the store aisles, influencing decisions and behaviors. The employee who knew too much. It was during a particularly busy morning that Ethan met Lena Alvarez, the barista at the shop. Unlike Martin and Cole, Lena seemed to genuinely enjoy what she did, and she observed everything around her attentively. "Have you ever noticed that the card machine always freezes when Cole is at the register?" she murmured casually while preparing a cappuccino. Ethan raised an eyebrow. "No. But does that really happen?" "It happens, and then he manually records the sales," she said, keeping her voice low, "and nobody questions it." This was an important clue, more important than she seemed to realize. Lena also revealed another detail. Martin hadn't always been like this. After a turbulent breakup with a former partner involved in illegal gambling, he started missing work, became aggressive with clients, and began acting suspiciously. It was as if he was spiraling downwards. For Ethan, this added a complex layer to the scenario. Martin could be dangerous or just desperate. Cole, on the other hand, seemed to be building a network of small irregularities that, added together, could explain Alexander's sudden interest in personally investigating the branch. An unexpected discovery. At the end of a long afternoon, when the store was already closed, Ethan decided to inspect the faulty cash register. Cole had assured him the problem was the wiring, but something there seemed intentionally altered. When he disassembled the panel, he found a part that had been manipulated precisely to cause random errors, not constant, but enough to justify manual adjustments to sales. And behind the machine, hidden under the drawer, he found a small envelope with notes of numbers and deadlines. Debts, parallel accounting, extortion. Before he could think any further, he heard footsteps behind him. It was Cole. "What are you doing?" he asked coldly. Ethan turned around calmly. "Checking the machine problem." Cole narrowed his eyes but didn't comment. He just crossed his arms and remained silent, observing for far too long. A heavy silence, a warning. When he finally left, Ethan knew he had gone from a simple repairman to a troublesome element within a system that someone wanted to keep hidden. Consequences of the subplots. These parallel stories began to intertwine. Martin was desperate for money. Cole manipulated sales records. The card machine was being sabotaged intentionally. Lena knew more than she let on. Alexander trusted Ethan to reveal a scheme that might be bigger than he imagined. And as Ethan walked home that night, he felt the weight of those revelations. He was no longer just a man trying to survive. He was someone at the center of a web of hidden interests. And each subplot heightened the tension of the main conflict, bringing him closer to decisions that could change or ruin his newfound chance at life. The millionaire, Ethan Parker, remained silent for a few seconds, observing the scene as the shopkeeper returned to the counter as if nothing had happened. The young man, embarrassed, clutched his backpack to his chest, ready to leave before someone said something worse. But Ethan stepped forward. "Hey, kid," he called, his voice firm but calm. The boy froze. He turned slowly, imagining that yet another person was going to mock him. "What's your name?" Ethan asked. "Lucas, sir." The voice came out weak, almost a whisper. Ethan nodded. "Lucas, are you hungry?" The young man hesitated, glancing at the shopkeeper, who rolled his eyes as if it were a waste of time. "Yes, but I don't have any money. I just thought maybe there was something they were going to throw away." Before Lucas could finish, Ethan raised his hand. "Come with me." He walked over to the fresh produce shelf. He picked up artisan breads, fruits, and a few high-value items. Lucas's eyes widened. It was more food than he'd seen in the entire last week. The shopkeeper narrowed his eyes. "Mr. Parker, are you sure? That kid won't be able to pay for that." Ethan stared at the man for a long, uncomfortable moment. Then he spoke, softly but firmly. "And since when does someone need to humiliate another person to sell food?" The shopkeeper swallowed hard. Ethan turned to Lucas and added, "Choose whatever you want without fear. Today, it's on me." Lucas took a deep breath, stunned, unable to understand why someone so important was helping a stranger, and then, discreetly, Ethan took a gold business card from his pocket. But before handing it over, he did something unexpected. He smiled. "After I eat, I need to talk to you. I think I can offer you more than just bread." Lucas picked up the food with trembling hands. The feeling was strange, a mixture of gratitude, fear, and disbelief. He didn't understand why a man so well-dressed, so clearly wealthy, was caring about someone like him. Outside the store, Ethan guided him to a nearby bench. The sun was beginning to set, tinting the windows of the buildings orange. It was too beautiful a scene for the chaotic moment Lucas was living through. "You can eat," said Ethan, sitting down beside her. "We'll talk later." Lucas didn't hesitate. He opened the artisanal bread and took the first bite, his eyes instantly filling with tears. He tried to hide it, but Ethan noticed. "How long have you been in this situation?" he asked. Lucas stopped chewing. He hesitated. 3 months, he murmured. "Since my mother got sick, I spent everything trying to take care of her. And when he swallowed hard. "When she passed away, I couldn't keep paying the rent." Ethan remained silent for a few seconds. Something in his gaze changed, as if that story had awakened old memories. "Are you alone?" he asked. Lucas nodded. Ethan took a deep breath and finally handed over the golden card. Lucas looked at it, confused. The card contained only a name and a phrase. Ethan Parker, Parker Industries, Human Opportunities Program. "What is that?" Lucas asked. Ethan replied simply, "This is a second chance. I have a program for vulnerable youth. Training, employment, temporary housing. It's not charity, it's an investment." Lucas's eyes widened, his heart racing. "But why? Why me?" Ethan leaned forward, looking into his eyes. "Because when I was your age, I asked for bread the same way, and someone believed me when no one else would." A heavy silence fell between the two. Then Ethan finished. "I want to do the same for you. If you accept, your life can change today." Lucas held his breath. It was like hearing an impossible proposal. For a moment, he didn't answer. Until, finally, I accept." And things began to change, but in a way that Lucas could never have imagined. A few hours later, Lucas was inside Ethan's car, a black sedan that seemed silent inside, as if isolating itself from the outside world. He tried not to touch anything, afraid of soiling the immaculate interior. Ethan realized. "Relax," he said. "Cars were made to be used, not admired." Lucas gave a shy half-smile. The car drove through the streets of Manhattan, but took a direction Lucas hadn't expected. It left the commercial area and entered an elegant neighborhood with modern buildings and security guards at the entrance. "Where are we going?" Lucas asked, already anticipating that he might be going too far. Perhaps he had misunderstood everything. Perhaps this was a trap, a misunderstanding, an illusion about to crumble. Ethan replied, "For one of the properties in the program. You'll have your own room, meals, psychological support, classes, and a paid internship. But first, I want to introduce you to someone." The car stopped in front of a mirrored glass building with the Parker Industries logo gleaming on the facade. Upon entering, employees greeted Ethan with evident respect, but also with surprise. The CEO almost never showed up unannounced. Ethan led Lucas to a large room, illuminated by the setting sun streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Inside, a woman stared at a monitor displaying complex graphics. She seemed focused until she noticed their presence. "Emily," called Ethan, "this is Lucas." She smiled kindly. "The new candidate for the program?" she asked. Lucas's eyes widened. "Were there already others?" Ethan nodded. But Emily, after a few seconds of studying the boy, frowned with a serious but not hostile expression. "Ethan, can I talk to you for a minute?" she said, asking for privacy. Ethan agreed and walked away, leaving Lucas alone in the room. He tried not to listen, but a few words escaped him. He is sure. He's not doing this just because of that day. He needs help. But I don't know if you're ready. Lucas swallowed hard. It seemed like something big was happening, something he didn't understand. When Ethan returned, there was a new firmness in his gaze, and also something that seemed vulnerable. He approached Lucas. You'll start early tomorrow morning. But before that, I want you to know something. Lucas stared at him, apprehensive. Ethan continued. I didn't choose you by chance. There's something in your story that connects to mine more than you realize. Lucas frowned. What do you mean? Ethan took a deep breath, like someone about to reveal a secret kept for years. Lucas, your mother, what was her name? Lucas was confused by the sudden question. Sarah Mendez. Ethan closed his eyes for a second, as if confirming something he feared. When she opened her mouth, her voice came out low and laden with meaning. I knew your mother. Lucas froze. Ethan added, and it wasn't by chance that I was in that store today. Lucas's heart raced. His life was about to be turned upside down. The silence that filled the room felt like it weighed a ton. Lucas stared at Ethan, unable to form a sentence. The revelation sounded impossible, and at the same time, frighteningly true because of the way Ethan was looking at him. Did you know my mother? Lucas finally managed to ask. Ethan took a deep breath, approaching the window. The reflection of the setting sun illuminated his face in a way that made it clear he was about to touch on something painful. Yes, I knew him. His voice was low. Many years ago, before I became who I am today. Lucas felt his stomach churn. And how did you two meet? Ethan turned slowly, looking at him with a gaze that mixed regret and longing. I used to live on the streets, just like you. He swallowed hard. And your mother was the first person who treated me with dignity. She shared food with me when I had nothing. When everyone else ignored me, she saw me. Lucas listened with a heavy heart. It was as if he were hearing about a younger, unknown version of his mother, a version he had never imagined. She saved my life, Ethan continued, and I had promised that if I ever had the means, I would help other people like she helped me. Lucas felt something warm run down his face. He realized too late that they were tears. But why didn't you look for her, he asked, his voice breaking. Why did she never show up? Ethan's face changed, becoming more tense, as if he had been waiting for this question his whole life. I searched, Ethan said, for years, but she moved several times, constantly changed jobs, and when I finally managed to track down some clue, it was too late. Lucas put his hand to his mouth, trying to hold back tears. Ethan stepped forward. When I saw you in that shop today, ordering bread the same way I once did, I felt something strange, something familiar, the way you spoke, your gaze, and the last name the shopkeeper mentioned. He sighed. It was impossible for me to simply ignore it. Lucas shook his head, trying to process everything. But then, what does that mean? Are you saying you're helping me just because my mother helped you? Ethan took a while to answer. When he did speak, it was with raw honesty. No, Lucas. I'm helping you because I owe it to her, because I see potential in you, but also because, he hesitated, you remind me so much of myself, and I can't let you fall into the same abyss I almost fell into. Lucas took a deep breath. His head was spinning. And that's all, he asked shyly. Isn't there anything else I should know? Ethan stood motionless for a moment. Emily, who had been watching from the doorway unnoticed, widened her eyes slightly, as if she knew what Ethan was about to say, and was worried about it. Then Ethan approached the boy and said something that sent shivers down Lucas's spine. There's one more thing. Lucas held his breath. Before she disappeared from my life, her mother told me that if I ever saw her again, I would probably have a greater reason to look for her. Lucas frowned, confused. Ethan concluded, "She told me that maybe I had left something behind." Silence settled in once more, deep, dense, almost suffocating. Lucas felt the ground disappear beneath him. "What are you trying to say?" he asked, his voice trembling. Ethan stared at him with an expression that mixed fear and hope. "Lucas, there's a chance, a real chance, that I could be more than just the man your mother helped." A shiver ran down Lucas's spine. "There's a chance I could be your father." The words echoed in Lucas's head like a silent explosion. He heard them, but couldn't believe them. He couldn't even react. He just stood there, staring at Ethan, as if everything around him had lost its sound and color. Emily stepped forward. "Ethan," she began cautiously. But Lucas raised his hand, asking for silence, without taking his eyes off Ethan. "You are saying," his voice faltered, "that you could be my father." Ethan didn't blink. He didn't look away. He didn't try to deny it. He simply replied, "I'm saying there's a real possibility. I can't say for sure, but I can't ignore it." Lucas felt like he was running out of air. "My mother never said anything about it," she whispered. "She probably had her reasons," Ethan replied, lowering his voice. "Reasons I wish I'd understood sooner, reasons I may never fully know." Lucas's heart was beating so hard he could feel his pulse in his neck. "And why?" He took a deep breath. "Why tell me this now, like this?" Ethan ran a hand over his face, clearly affected. "Because when I saw you today, something inside me unearthed memories I'd tried to bury for years. Because you deserve to know that you might not be as alone as you think. And why hide it? After all, that would be cowardly." Emily watched intently, with a mixture of empathy and apprehension. She seemed to know that this could change everything, for better or for worse. Lucas couldn't think straight. The room seemed small, cramped, as if it were about to collapse. "I don't know what to think," he admitted, his hands trembling. "You don't need to decide anything right now," Ethan said, taking a cautious step. "What you feel is valid, and you have all the time you need to process it." Ethan's gentle tone only made everything more confusing. "What if," Lucas hesitated, "what if it's not true? What if you're mistaken?" "Then I'll continue helping you," Ethan replied firmly. "Not out of obligation, but because I want to. Because you're someone who deserves a real chance." Lucas closed his eyes for a moment. And then something unexpected happened. He heard laughter. Muffled, distant laughter came from the hallway. Lucas opened his eyes, confused, and saw two security guards discreetly watching. One of them murmured something to his colleague, and they both laughed again before turning away as if nothing had happened. Lucas felt a pang of shame. That moment, so personal, so painful, seemed exposed. And that's when he noticed the sideways glances from some employees passing by the back door. Whispers, sighs, undue curiosity. Emily noticed that too. "That's enough," she said, in a firm tone he had never heard before. She closed the door immediately and stared at Ethan. "This needs to be done somewhere else, in private. You know how this building is. People love to talk." Ethan took a deep breath, his expression tense, angry, but not with Emily. Angry that he had allowed such an intimate moment to be exposed. "You're right," he agreed. "Lucas, come with me." Lucas hesitated. "Where to?" "To a place where no one will hear a word we say." Lucas looked at Emily. She smiled kindly but worried. "You're safe with him," he said. "Really?" And that's how Lucas, still dazed, followed Ethan down a private corridor that led to the internal elevators, accessible only by card. The elevator went up to the top floor, where there was a restricted quiet floor, isolated from the rest of the company. Ethan opened the door to a spacious room with enormous windows and wood-paneled walls. Instead of the cold luxury of the lower floor, this room felt personal, almost intimate. It was Ethan's private office, his refuge. Lucas entered slowly, and when Ethan closed the door, he said calmly, "Now we can talk without interruptions." Lucas swallowed hard, and it was at that exact moment that something caught his attention. A door was ajar inside the office. He approached, curious, and saw something that made him freeze. Pictures, photos, documents, all neatly arranged along an entire wall, a sort of memorial. And in the center, illuminated by a soft light, a photo of his mother, younger, smiling, with the same tender gaze that Lucas carried. He brought his hand to his mouth, overcome with emotion. Ethan, standing behind him, simply said, "I never stopped looking for her." Lucas felt his legs go weak. That changed everything. Lucas stood frozen before the photograph, unable to move a muscle. It was as if time had stopped inside that silent room. Every detail of the image seemed to scream memories he didn't know he still had. His mother's gentle smile, the way she tilted her head, the soft light reflecting in her eyes. "Why?" Lucas murmured, without taking his eyes off the photo. "Why did you keep this?" Ethan approached slowly, giving the boy room to breathe. "Because she was the first person who believed in me." His voice came out low, almost broken. "And because, even after we drifted apart, I could never forget her." Lucas swallowed hard, turning his gaze to other items on the wall. An old name tag with her name on it, newspaper clippings about places where she might have worked, printed reports with handwritten notes. It looked like the kind of research someone would do trying to track someone down for years. "You really," Lucas hesitated, "spent that much time looking for her?" Ethan nodded. "I came close a few times, but we always ran into problems, changes of address, temporary jobs. Nothing settled down, as if she were running away from something." He took a deep breath. "Or from someone." Lucas felt his heart tighten. "Running away? From what?" Ethan seemed to think carefully before answering. "That's the question I've been trying to answer for years." Lucas turned to him, intrigued and apprehensive. "What do you mean by that?" Ethan crossed his arms, leaning against the wall with a serious expression. "Lucas, when I finally found out she'd had a child, something didn't make sense. Her mother would never have hidden it without a very strong reason." He paused. "And the more I investigated, the more I realized there were traces of someone else who was also looking for her." A shiver ran down Lucas's spine. "Anyone? Who?" Ethan shook his head. "I don't know yet. But he opened a drawer and took out an envelope. "I found this while I was investigating, and I think you should see it." He handed the envelope to Lucas. The boy, his hands trembling, carefully opened it. Inside, there was a letter yellowed with age, written in handwriting he would recognize anywhere, her mother's. He took a deep breath and began to read. "If someone ever finds this letter, it means that perhaps I will no longer be able to protect my son as I should. I don't want him to carry the weight of my past, but he needs to know that there is someone who can help him when I can't anymore. Someone I trusted. If there is justice in the world, it will find this man before others find him first." Lucas's throat tightened. He turned to look at Ethan, incredulous. "Was this for you?" she asked, her voice weak. Ethan ran a hand through his hair. Disturbed. "I don't know," he said with blunt honesty, "but everything indicates that I do." Lucas felt his stomach sink. What did she mean by others? Ethan hesitated for a few long seconds, as if pondering how far he should go, how far that conversation could be safe. "Lucas," he began slowly, "your mother was someone who always tried to do the right thing, but she wasn't always surrounded by the right people. When I lived on the streets, I met dangerous people, people who took advantage of those who were vulnerable. And your mother tried to help people who didn't want to be helped." Lucas frowned. "Do you think those people were after her?" "I think she found out something she shouldn't have," Ethan replied. "Or she saw something that put her at risk. And to protect you, she disappeared." Silence settled in once more, heavy, suffocating. Lucas clutched the envelope to his chest. "So, do you think someone else might be looking for me too?" Ethan replied without hesitation. "Yes." Lucas's world seemed to shrink around him. "But I'm here now," Ethan said, taking a firm step. "And as long as I'm here, nobody's going to lay a finger on you." Before Lucas could answer, the office door burst open. Emily entered, breathless and pale, clutching her cell phone. "Ethan," she said tensely, "you need to see this immediately." Ethan frowned. "What happened?" She turned the screen towards him. It was a video, recorded outside the building. Lucas recognized the moment immediately, him and Ethan getting into the car hours earlier, but the video had been edited with manipulated subtitles, implying that Ethan was recruiting street children for illegal activities. And it had been posted by an anonymous profile, a profile that already had over 40,000 views. Lucas felt his legs trembling. This is about me," he whispered. Ethan clenched his fist, his jaw locked. "It's not just about you," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "This is a direct attack," Emily added, "and it doesn't seem like just any attack, it seems planned." Ethan looked at Lucas, and it was impossible not to notice the glint of contained anger mixed with something deeper, fear that this was only the beginning. "Lucas," he said firmly, "someone is trying to destroy everything around me. And apparently, they're willing to use you for that." Lucas felt his soul freeze. "But why?" Ethan answered without a single pause. "Because someone knew that if they wanted to hurt me where it hurts, all they had to do was touch you." The silence that followed Ethan's words seemed to snatch the air from our lungs. Lucas didn't know if he was trembling with fear, anger, or both at the same time. The idea of someone using his name, his image, his life to hurt another was as absurd as it was devastating. Lucas tried to speak, but his voice failed him. "I didn't do anything. I swear, I didn't." "I know you didn't do it," Ethan interrupted firmly. "No one with a modicum of common sense would believe that video. The problem is, we're not dealing with sensible people." Emily, still holding her cell phone, seemed more nervous than before. "The video is spreading fast. They used specific hashtags, paid for boosting. This isn't some random person making a joke. It's a coordinated operation." Ethan turned sharply to her. "Can you trace where it came from?" "I'm already trying, but the profile is clean," she replied. "Created today, no trace, professional." Lucas felt his heart race. This means that whoever did this filmed me, followed us, is watching us. "Yes," Ethan said bluntly, "and that's what worries me." He began pacing the room restlessly, like a caged animal. It was the first time Lucas had seen him lose control of his composure. "They knew where you would be," Ethan added. "The time, the location. The perfect angle to manipulate the video. It's no coincidence." "But who would do that?" Lucas asked, startled. "Do you think it has anything to do with my mother?" Ethan stopped immediately. Emily looked up, worried. "That's a possibility," Ethan replied. "But it could also have to do with my enemies. And the truth is, I have many." Lucas felt a chill. "So I'm in the middle of all this without even knowing why?" "Not through any fault of your own," Ethan said, "but because you've become important." What kind of importance was that? Lucas wasn't sure if he wanted to find out. Emily took a deep breath and in a calmer tone asked, "What are we going to do?" Ethan stopped in the center of the room, finally regaining some control. "First, let's get Lucas out of our sights." He looked at the boy. "You're not going back out on the street. Not now. It's too dangerous." "But I have nowhere to go," said Lucas, his voice choked with emotion. "Yes, I do," Ethan replied. "With me," Lucas froze. I don't know if—" "I'm not asking you to trust me," Ethan interrupted. "I'm asking you to stay safe until we understand who's behind this. Then you can decide what to do." He didn't shout. He didn't beg. He simply stated it. And that's precisely what made the statement so impactful. Emily placed her hand on Lucas's shoulder. He's right. This situation could escalate quickly. Lucas took a deep breath. Everything was happening too fast. From begging at a bakery a few days ago to becoming a potential target for dangerous people. And what about the video, he asked. This will affect your life, your work. It's already affected you, Ethan said, and that's why we're going to act before anyone thinks of using this against you. He approached the boy and placed a firm hand on his shoulder. Lucas, do you trust me enough to ask me a difficult question? Lucas hesitated. What question? Ethan's gaze was serious, almost heavy. Do you remember seeing anyone strange hanging around you before you met me? He paused. Someone who spoke to your mother. A name, a face, anything. Lucas tried to retrieve memories, but all he found were shadows. There was a man, he said slowly. A guy who sometimes showed up near the shelter where I slept. Tall, always wearing a cap. He would ask if I was Rosa's son. Ethan's body stiffened. Rosa? He repeated. That's what some people called my mother when she worked in a nursing home. I don't know if it was a false name or a nickname, but many people knew her that way. Ethan exchanged a quick glance with Emily, a look that Lucas couldn't decipher, but which clearly said a lot between the two of them. Lucas, Ethan said slowly, did that man say anything else? Lucas tried to remember. He struggled with the memory, with the fear, with the feeling that something had always been wrong and he had simply ignored it. He always said the same phrase, "Tell her that time is running out." Emily put her hand to her mouth, and Ethan's face darkened like a storm. That man, Ethan murmured, is not someone you should have met. Neither you nor your mother. Lucas took a step back. Who is he? Ethan hesitated for a few seconds before answering. When he did, his voice was low and filled with a controlled fear. He is someone who disappeared years ago. Someone I believe to be dead. But if he's behind you... He stared at Lucas as if he had just witnessed a death sentence. So all of this is much bigger than I imagined. Lucas felt the world spin. Ethan, who is this man? She asked, almost whispering. Ethan took a deep breath and finally said the name. His name is Caleb Grant. Lucas didn't recognize the name. But Ethan's reaction made it clear. That name carried something very, very dangerous. The meeting room on the 42nd floor seemed far too big for Lucas. He stared at the glass floor, trying to ignore the fact that he could see the entire city below. In front of him, a long table, ultra-thin computers, well-dressed people walking to and fro, and he, with an old backpack on his lap, feeling completely out of place. Ethan entered soon after, accompanied by 3 directors. Everyone fell silent upon seeing him. "Gentlemen," said Ethan, "this is Lucas." Some glanced at him. Others analyzed him as if trying to figure out what he's doing here. Lucas felt the weight of each gaze. "He's going to participate in our opportunities program," Ethan continued, "and I want you to treat this as a top priority." One of the directors, a grey-haired man with a rigid expression, crossed his arms. "With all due respect, Mr. Parker," he glanced at Lucas, "this isn't part of our quarterly goals. We have a pending merger, international negotiations, and you want to dedicate resources to—" He didn't finish the sentence, but the whole room understood. Ethan gave a cold smile. "That's exactly why I'm sitting in the CEO chair, and you're not," he said. Silence fell immediately. "Lucas has potential," he continued, "and he'll start tomorrow. I want him to go through each department for at least a week, to learn everything from logistics to development, and when he's finished, I want them to bring me a report on his progress." The room fell silent. The directors nodded, some clearly displeased. When everyone left, Lucas was left alone with Ethan. I don't deserve this," she said almost in a whisper. Ethan stared intently at him. "You don't understand," he replied. People like us never deserve anything in the eyes of others. We earn it, and you will earn it too. Lucas took a deep breath, trying to absorb those words. I just need you to take the first step, Ethan said. Tomorrow at 8, use the temporary badge. The rest, leave it to me. Ethan turned to leave, but before reaching the door, he stopped. Oh, and Lucas, she said, glancing over her shoulder, don't tell anyone about what happened today with Richard, the store manager. I have my own plans for him. Lucas felt a shiver run down his spine. When Ethan left, he was left alone in that gigantic room, with the feeling that his life was about to change. For the better, yes, but also for something bigger and far more dangerous than he had imagined. The following morning, Lucas arrived at the Parker Industries building before sunrise. The doorman recognized him immediately, not because he already knew him, but because he had received clear instructions. Mr. Lucas, you can go up. The 18th floor is waiting for you. Sir, that still seemed strange. The elevator ascended silently. With each floor that passed, Lucas felt a mixture of anxiety and adrenaline rising in his chest. When the doors opened, he found himself in an area completely different from that chic room where Ethan had taken him the day before. This floor was a hive of activity. Logistics teams monitoring enormous screens displaying maps, delivery routes, and inventory analyses. It was where the company breathed. A woman with a ponytail and a manager's name tag came towards her. You must be the special newcomer, she said without irony. I'm Clara. Mr. Parker asked me to look after your first few weeks. She handed him a tablet. Here are your tasks for the day. Nothing glamorous. You're going to learn how everything works, and that starts with understanding the basics. Ready? Lucas nodded. The hours passed quickly. He learned how to register orders, track deliveries, and identify system failures. Clara was surprised by how quickly he understood everything. You have a knack for this, she said late in the morning. Really? Do you know how many interns I've seen freeze up in their first week? Lucas smiled shyly. During the break, he went down to the cafeteria. He grabbed a tray, chose a sandwich, and looked for an empty table. He didn't want to bother anyone. But before he could sit down, he heard two voices behind him. It's him, murmured an employee. The boy the boss brought personally. He must be a relative, said the other, or one of those charity cases that the CEO insists on shoving into the company. Lucas tried to ignore it, but a third voice, more acidic, cut through the air. I bet it won't last a week. He squeezed the tray between his fingers. Before the discomfort could escalate, Clara appeared out of nowhere and placed a hand on his shoulder. Hey, she said with a firm smile, you sit with me. Let them deal with their own insecurity. They sat down together. Lucas relaxed, finally able to eat. You're going to notice something about this company, Clara said, biting into her lunch. Everyone here respects Ethan, admires him even, but they're also afraid of him. Fear. Lucas's eyes widened. Fear, she confirmed. He's fair, but he's ruthless. And when he chooses someone, like he chose you, it messes with a lot of people's egos. Lucas swallowed hard. He didn't know if that made him feel calmer or more nervous. When he returned to the floor, however, he found something unexpected on his temporary desk, a black envelope with his name handwritten on it. He looked around. No one seemed to have left anything there. Carefully, he opened it. Inside, just one sentence, written in firm letters. Don't trust anyone in here. E.P. Lucas felt his heart stop for a second. That didn't sound like advice. It seemed like a warning. And at that moment, he understood. Joining Parker Industries could have been a blessing, or the beginning of something far more dangerous. Lucas's hands trembled as he held the note. He turned it over, checked it against the light, tried to decipher if it was truly Ethan's handwriting, but he had never seen the CEO's writing before. Still, the style seemed firm, calculated, precise, exactly like Ethan. He put the envelope in his pocket the moment Clara reappeared. Is everything all right there? She asked. Everything, yes, he replied too quickly. She narrowed her eyes, suspicious but didn't insist. Lucas returned to work, but his mind remained fixated on the message, "Don't trust anyone in here." The phrase echoed like a constant warning, as if every person around could be a threat. End of the workday. Late in the afternoon, Clara said goodbye, and the elevator began to descend. Lucas breathed a sigh of relief, relieved to have survived the first day, until the elevator suddenly stopped on the 30th floor without anyone having called it. The doors slowly opened, revealing a dark corridor. A tall figure appeared in the doorway. Richard, the store manager. Lucas felt his stomach drop. "Look who's getting ahead in life," Richard said, stepping into the elevator with a crooked smile. "The poor guy who used to beg for bread." Lucas took a step back. "What are you doing here?" Richard rew. "I worked for Parker Industries for 10 years, kid. The store where you saw me isn't just any store, it's company-owned. I was just reassigned. But now, because of you, I had a meeting with HR that didn't end very well." He moved a little closer. "Do you think you're protected because the boss likes you? Do you really think so?" Lucas held his breath. The memory of the note burned in his mind. Richard lowered his voice. "I'll give you some advice. In here, nobody gets anything for free. Not you, much less you." Before he could say more, the elevator started moving again on its own. The doors opened on the ground floor. Richard gave one last menacing smile and left without looking back. Lucas stood there, motionless. Outside. When he left the building, he saw a black SUV parked right in front. The rear window slowly rolled down. Era Ethan. "Come in," he said seriously. Lucas entered without arguing. The door closed. Ethan didn't say anything for a few seconds. Then he turned his face and stared at him with a look that was too intense to be casual. "Did you receive the envelope?" he asked. Lucas nodded. "Then I need you to answer with complete honesty," Ethan continued. "Today, did someone speak to you in a strange way? Did someone get too close?" The image of Richard in the elevator immediately came to mind. Lucas took a deep breath, hesitantly. "Yes," he said finally. Ethan closed his eyes as if confirming a long-held suspicion. "I knew it," she murmured. "I knew he would do it." "What's happening, Ethan?" Lucas asked desperately. "Why am I in the middle of this?" Ethan looked out the window, then looked back at him. "Lucas, within this company there are people who would do anything to bring down those I support, those I choose. And now that I've chosen you..." He leaned forward a little more. "They already tried to test you on the first day. That means you're more important than you think." Lucas felt his heart pounding. "Tomorrow," Ethan said firmly, "everything changes, but before moving forward, you need to understand that from now on, you're not just doing an internship." The car stopped. The door opened automatically. "You're going to war." And Lucas, unknowingly, was already in the line of fire. The SUV disappeared into the traffic, leaving Lucas standing on the sidewalk with his head spinning. A war! The word weighed like lead. He walked to the small room he was temporarily renting, locked the door, and threw himself onto the bed, staring at the ceiling. It was all too much to process. Parker Industries, the suspicious glances, Richard, the note, Ethan, all in a single day. Sleep was slow to come. The second day, Lucas arrived early, earlier than any other employee. The building still seemed asleep when he swiped his temporary badge at the entrance. He went straight up to the 42nd floor, where Ethan had asked them to meet earlier than usual. When the elevator doors opened, he found something that surprised him. The meeting room was completely empty, except for Ethan and a large table with 2 corporate-level name badges. "Sit down," Ethan said without smiling. Lucas obeyed. Ethan slid one of the badges toward him. The badge had silver edges and a holographic seal he had never seen before. "What is that?" Lucas asked. "Level 3 internal access," Ethan replied. "You'll be working directly with me starting today." Lucas choked. "But yesterday you said I would be rotating through the departments for weeks." That was before Richard tried to talk to you, before we found out someone had informed him of your joining the company. Ethan crossed his arms. Things have changed. You're going to be in the internal files. Files? Ethan nodded. I need you to help me review reports from the last 8 months. Something is wrong, very wrong, and I can't trust anyone here. He stared intently at Lucas. No one, except you. Lucas felt the weight of responsibility, as if an invisible hand was squeezing his chest. Why me? He insisted. Ethan smiled slightly, but it wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of someone who knew more than he let on. Because those who come from humble beginnings learn very early on to recognize lies. And I need someone who can see through what my executives are trying to hide from me. He placed a thick folder on the table. Start with this. A purchasing report that doesn't add up. Millions of dollars are missing in phantom suppliers. I want to know who is stealing from my company. Lucas opened the folder. Numbers, tables, signatures, everything absurdly complex. I will try, he said. Don't try it, Ethan replied. Do it. Hours later, Lucas was engrossed in the documents, marking inconsistencies, connecting names, mapping purchase routes. He was so focused that he didn't even notice someone entering the room. A female voice spoke behind him. So it's you. Lucas turned around, startled. In the doorway stood an elegant woman in a navy blue suit with impeccable posture. Her eyes were sharp enough to cut glass. I'm Ava Sterling, she said, extending a hand that Lucas cautiously shook. Chief Financial Officer, and you are the new kid Ethan brought. Lucas tried to smile. Yes, I'm the intern. Ava laughed, but not in a friendly way. An intern with level 3 access. How funny. Lucas froze. She approached slowly, looking at the open folder. Looking through the reports, I see. She folded her arms. This isn't part of any training program. Lucas swallowed hard. Ethan asked me to revise. Ethan, Ava interrupted, doesn't tell everything to everyone, not even to me. So I'll just give you one piece of advice. She leaned in, getting very close, her voice low and firm. If the CEO really put you in this, then you're in real danger. And if he didn't, then you're getting involved in something you don't understand. She walked away, leaving a sentence hanging in the air. Anyway, someone in here doesn't want you alive. She left without looking back. Lucas stood still, motionless, his heart beating too fast. It was official. He wasn't just investigating. He was being hunted. Lucas slowly closed the briefcase in front of him, as if the simple act of hiding it could lessen the imminent danger. But nothing did. Nothing eased the feeling that a shadow had just moved over his head. Ava Sterling, Chief Financial Officer, confident, precise, and dangerous, or is someone trying to warn him? He didn't know. And when he finally took a deep breath and prepared to return to the reports, his cell phone vibrated. An unknown message. Stop looking. Last warning. His heart raced. He looked around. The room was empty, silent, barren. But someone knew exactly what he was doing. And it was close. The first meeting with the internal team. At 10 a.m., Lucas was called for a joint presentation with 3 department heads. Ethan had requested that he attend all the day's meetings, observing in silence. Conference room A21 was much more cramped than the one on the 42nd floor. The air conditioning flickered, the projectors glitched, and 3 managers presented impeccably prepared reports. 2 impeccable. One of them, Vernon Reed, International Purchasing, avoided looking at Lucas. All the time, as if he feared the boy was going to set off some kind of bomb in there. When the presentation ended, Ethan slowly closed his laptop. Great. But before we wrap up, his gaze moved directly to Vernon. Vernon, about the Nevada suppliers. The tone was too soft. Were you able to align the data I asked for? Vernon swallowed hard. I'm still gathering the information. That's strange, said Ethan, drumming his fingers on the table. Because I asked for that almost a week ago. Silence. Lucas observed everything, trying to memorize expressions, gestures, and slight hesitations. And then he realized Vernon's hands were trembling, very. "Bring everything by tomorrow morning," Ethan said firmly, "and this time, complete." Vernon nodded too quickly, gathering his things like someone who wanted to disappear as fast as possible. When everyone had left the room, Ethan called out, "Lucas, walk with me." Glass corridor. The two walked along a suspended corridor between buildings, glass walls on all sides. The wind seemed to howl outside. The city was just a grey blur below. "What did you see today?" Ethan asked. Lucas hesitated. "Vernon is hiding something." "Obviously," Ethan replied. "I want to know if you noticed." "What?" Lucas took a deep breath. He couldn't look at me. He seemed nervous, like he was afraid I knew something he didn't want anyone to see. Ethan stopped walking. She turned to him. "Lucas," he said in a grave voice, "nearly $10 million were moved to non-existent suppliers. This isn't ordinary fear. This is fear of prison, fear of going down with those above him." Above. Ethan placed his hand on Lucas's shoulder, squeezing lightly. "I didn't put you here because I thought your story was nice. I put you here because someone inside this company is stealing my empire. And you've lived in a world where lies shine brighter than truths." He lifted Lucas's chin with a finger. "You see what other executives don't see." Lucas felt a chill run down his spine. "And now," Ethan continued, "I need you to do something." "What?" "I want you to follow Vernon without being seen today after work." Lucas took a step back, startled. "Follow? I don't know how to do that." "You know more than you realize," Ethan said. "You lived on the streets. You survived what many here could never endure. And I trust you more than any professional with a college degree." Lucas tried to breathe, but it felt like the air was too heavy. "And most importantly," Ethan said, "if someone is threatening you via text message, then they're afraid of what you might find out." Lucas froze. "Like you!" Ethan took his own cell phone out of his pocket. He showed the screen. It was the same message that Lucas had received. "Stop looking. Last warning." Sent at the same time. Lucas felt his stomach drop. Ethan put his cell phone away, staring at the city through the glass. "This isn't just about money. It's about betrayal. And I need to know who's on the other side before they do something I can't undo." He looked at Lucas. "Are you with me on this?" Lucas swallowed, his heart pounding in his chest. "I am." Ethan smiled for the first time that day. "Great. At 7. Lobby. Don't be late." The clock read 6:55 a.m. when Lucas went down to the lobby. The place was almost empty, except for 2 security guards and a receptionist finishing up the last notes of her shift. Outside, night was swallowing the city, illuminated only by the bluish reflections of the corporate buildings. Ethan was nowhere to be seen. Lucas took a deep breath, trying to prepare himself for what was to come. Follow someone? He had never done that consciously. The streets taught him other skills, reading intentions, surviving the next day. But this seemed like an adult, sophisticated and risky version of the same logic. At 7:03 a.m., the elevator doors opened with adding. Vernon rushed out, his briefcase clutched to his chest, sweating despite the cold air. He walked quickly without looking to either side, crossing the lobby with short, hard steps. Lucas hid behind one of the marble columns. His heart was beating so loudly it seemed to echo. The cell phone vibrated. "Ethan, I'm watching everything on the cameras. Keep your distance. He's going to turn right." Lucas looked around discreetly, cameras in every corner. Ethan was monitoring. He followed Vernon about 20 meters away, stepping out onto the sidewalk. The cold air hit him like a slap, but it served to keep him alert. Vernon crossed the street and entered a side street, almost deserted, lit by flickering yellowish lamps. The kind of place where nobody asked questions. Lucas stayed behind, watching every move. The first clue, Vernon stopped beside an underground parking garage. He didn't go in immediately. He looked back. Twice. Lucas ducked behind a trash container just as Vernon was searching the surrounding area. His heart felt like it was about to burst through his shirt. When Vernon finally drove down the parking ramp, Lucas waited 3 long seconds before starting to walk again. The phone vibrated again. Ethan. He never goes there without a reason. He has something hidden in that parking lot. Look for one of his cars or someone he usually meets with. Lucas typed quickly. Lucas. Are you sure this is safe? The answer came instantly. Ethan. None of this is safe. Keep going. Swallowing his fear, Lucas went down the ramp. The parking lot was enormous and damp, with leaks in the walls. The poor lighting created wide, distorted shadows. The echo of Vernon's footsteps reverberated in the distance. Lucas followed him, hiding behind cars, pillars, and dark crevices, until Vernon stopped in front of a black sedan. He opened the door. He went in, but he didn't start the car. Lucas moved a little closer, trying to see around the corner. That's when he realized there was another person inside the car, a rigid, motionless silhouette seated in the passenger seat. Lucas held his breath. He stood between 2 tall vehicles, observing. Vernon handed the folder to the figure beside him. Thin, precise hands, probably a woman. The voices echoed muffled. Lucas strained his ear. Oh, he is suspicious. The new kid? Ethan shouldn't have brought someone from outside to advance the plan. Before he finds out, everything falls apart. Lucas mentally noted down every word, every fragment. Suddenly, Vernon raised his head. He looked directly in the direction where Lucas was. Lucas cowered behind the car, his heart frozen. Steps, the sound of a car door opening. The woman's voice. Someone is listening to us. Lucas ran behind another car, trying not to make a sound, trying to control his breathing. Footsteps drew closer, closer, even closer. A metallic noise, like something being cocked. Lucas felt his blood run cold. A few meters away from him, a shadow was cast on the ground. They knew they were armed, and he was in prison. The woman's voice echoed through the parking lot, cold as steel. Who's there? Show yourself now, or we'll settle this the hard way. Lucas clenched his hands, his whole body trembling. He was 1 step away from being discovered, 1 step away from death. If you want to continue, just say next. Sure, I'll conclude the story in a complete, coherent way, with the surprising ending you chose, tying up all the loose ends and revealing the truth behind Ethan, the deviations, the executives, and Lucas. The following is the final conclusion, plus epilogue, plus call to action, maintaining the realistic and tense tone of the plot. The confrontation in the parking lot. The woman and Vernon moved slowly between the cars. Lucas held his breath, retreating millimeter by millimeter. When the woman pointed the gun directly at the shadow where he was hiding, a sound cut through the silence. Put your weapon down. Now. The voice echoed through the parking lot like thunder. Era Ethan. She turned around quickly, surprised but too late. Ethan was with 2 armed bodyguards, all wearing discreet vests and bearing the posture of those who had trained for this. You, Vernon stammered, his face turning pale. How did you find us? Lucas was never alone, Ethan said, approaching. You're the ones who underestimated the boy. The woman's eyes widened. You used him as bait. Lucas felt the impact of the phrase like a punch. Ethan didn't deny it. He just kept his gaze fixed on the 2 conspirators. You embezzled money, hid non-existent contracts, manipulated reports, and you thought I wouldn't find out, he said. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was conspiring with outside investors to bring down the entire company. Vernon fell to his knees, defeated, but the woman, Ava Sterling, did not. Ava gave a cold smile. Do you know what your mistake was, Ethan? You thought putting a poor kid in here would be enough to stop us. Before anyone could react, Ava reached into the car, pulling out something that glistened in the dim light. It was a detonator. 1 touch, she said, and it all goes down. Your data, your files, your building, your little savior. Lucas felt the ground disappear beneath him. It was all planned. literally. But Ethan didn't move. He didn't even blink. "Ava," he said calmly, "if you had the courage to press that button, you would have pressed it already." She trembled. "Just for a second, but enough." Ethan nodded. One of her bodyguards moved forward in a swift, precise motion, snatching the detonator from her hand. Ava was immobilized, screaming insults, while Vernon sobbed, completely defeated. Lucas stood there, unsure whether he felt relieved or betrayed. When silence finally fell over the parking lot, Ethan turned to him. "I'm so sorry," she said. "You shouldn't have had to go through this. But I needed to know who was against me, and I needed someone they wouldn't suspect." Lucas stood motionless. "You used me," she said, her voice trembling. "I gave you an opportunity," Ethan replied. "And you saved this company." Lucas looked away. "I didn't want to save a company. I just wanted a piece of bread that no one would laugh in my face when I asked for it." The phrase hung in the air. Ethan didn't find an immediate answer. He simply sighed. He took a black envelope out of his pocket. He handed it to Lucas. "This is yours," he said. Inside there was a contract, a permanent level 4 badge, and a check. Lucas opened the envelope. The check was for used $250,000. "Consider this an apology," Ethan said, "and a choice. If you want to stay, the badge is yours. If you want to leave, the check is yours." Lucas gripped the envelope tightly. For the first time, he was the one in power. He looked at Ethan, for parking, for everything he has lived through. And then he made his decision. Lucas put the envelope in his pocket. He walked over to Ethan. He held out his badge, and he dropped it on the floor. "I don't want your company," he said. "I want my life back." And he walked away towards the parking lot exit without looking back. Ethan called for him, but Lucas didn't stop. Not that day. Not after all. When she emerged onto the street, she felt the cold wind hit her face, and for the first time in a long time, that wind felt like freedom. He had nothing, but I didn't owe anything to anyone either, and that was more valuable than any check. 3 months later, Lucas was quietly working at a neighborhood bakery. He never cashed the check. He kept it in a drawer as a silent reminder that his dignity was not for sale. One day, while serving coffee to a customer, a shy boy came in and asked, "Do you have any expired bread that I could eat?" Lucas smiled. He opened the shop window, and he handed the boy a bag full of things. "You don't need to pay," he said. The boy smiled back. At that moment, Lucas realized, you didn't need to be a millionaire to change lives. All it took was being human. If this story touched you in any way, through suspense, drama, transformation, or simply humanity, share it with someone who also needs to remember that dignity and character are worth more than any wealth. Comment, discuss, reflect. Would you have made the same decision as Lucas? What does it really mean to win in life? Stories are bridges, and each reflection can inspire a new beginning.